friends, it's Tess and welcome to Wander Wealthy. If you're new here, this is a channel and community for women in their 20s and 30s looking to get inspired and get results towards achieving their personal growth, travel, and money goals. Today we're mixing in a little bit of money with a little bit of travel and talking about how to set a travel budget. I have a step-by-step formula to help you build out your travel budget, plus some really great tips on how to save some money while you're doing so. So let's dive on in. Step number one is to plan out your travel budget far in advance. If you have a vacation planned out maybe for next year, this is the perfect time to start. When you're planning out your travel budget, there are some major expense items that can make a big impact on the cost of your trip, and that is airfare and accommodation. By getting prepared for your trip well in advance, you can find some more budget-friendly airline tickets as well as accommodation options. But you definitely need time to consider all the different ways that you could be saving money, so I recommend having about 9 months to 12 months before you take your trip, so you can really make sure that you're making the most of your money. Other than finding some really awesome deals, if you start way in advance, you can also start saving for your trip well in advance. I use a system where I have separate savings accounts to pre-save for different things that I like to splurge and indulge in, one of which is a travel account. Before you even figure out how much your trip is gonna cost, start saving now. Do $10 or $50 a week, whatever you can muster, so that you already have a head start towards having a really nice cushion for your trip. One final thing to do before you actually get into everything else about your trip is picking out where you want to go. And aside from looking into the different costs of the flights to get to that location, also look into the currency and how much you can afford in that currency based on your local currency. Consider the conversion rates and also just the overall cost of living, because eating out in Thailand is going to be a whole lot more affordable than eating out in Switzerland. Okay, step two is to plan your flights. Now, flight costs are probably going to be the biggest expense of your entire excursion, so you want to plan this out well in advance. If you're traveling internationally, you want from 3 months to 6 or even 9 months, depending on when they release the airline tickets. But really start looking at the cost that that trip is going to be so that you know what to expect when it actually comes time to book. A couple hacks are that one, with more flexibility, offers cheaper options. So if you're able to fly on a Tuesday or a Wednesday or a Thursday instead of Friday or Saturday, you might be able to have cheaper tickets. And this is one of the perks of planning way in advance, because then you know when you need to start taking your vacation time for work, and you can plan everything around some of the cheapest airline tickets. You'll want to use online tools like Skyscanner, Expedia, or Google Flights to figure out which places are a little bit more affordable to fly into, and then find out which budget airlines will connect you to your end destination. A second hack is you can actually significantly reduce the amount of money you spend on your airline tickets if you learn how to travel hack using airline rewards credit cards. Now, there's a smart way to do this without going into debt or ruining your credit, so I'm going to link my free travel hacking 101 training, how to get cheap flights using airline credit cards, in the description box below. You can follow it and become a newbie travel hacking expert to get your next flight almost completely or entirely paid for. Once you get a price or a points idea of how much it's going to cost for you to fly to your destination, you also want to consider the transportation within that place. Now, we're not going to talk about transport costs quite yet, but this specific transportation cost I actually loop into the cost of the flight, because you need to get from the airport to your accommodation and back again. Now, you might not know what the actual accommodation is that you're staying in, but just look into what the cost is going to be for you to get from the airport to the city center of the place that you're visiting. Make sure you do your research again here, because you don't always want to have to rely on taxis. Taxis can be one of the most expensive ways to get to accommodations, and there's often things like buses, shuttles, or trains that can get you to the city center of any international city for a fraction of the cost. Now, once you've gotten the entire cost put together for your flight and additional transportation to your final destination, then you can take that number and put it down in a spreadsheet or in your journal. Just have it on a piece of paper in front of you so you know what that cost is going to be approximately. The next step number 3, is to plan your accommodation. There are so many options for you to find affordable accommodation in the place that you're visiting. But if you want to treat yourself and stay in a hotel, you can do that too. In some cases, hotels can be cheaper than hostels even. But like I said, you also have hostels, Airbnbs, you can stay with a friend, or you can even try couch surfing, which is crashing on an unknown person's couch, but you do it completely for free. I like to use websites like booking.com for hotels, Hostel World for hostels, and then of course Airbnb for Airbnbs. Now take it from me, I am actually an Airbnb host in the city of Chicago, and it has been an amazing experience for me to meet a bunch of new people, and I love staying at Airbnbs internationally. If you want to get almost $40 off your trip, you can go to my referral link down in the description box to snag your coupon if you're a first-time Airbnb user. I love the platform, I love being able to pick where I stay in probably unaffordable areas if I had to pick a hotel, and get to know some of the hosts involved. Plus, you get a kitchen. Now, I've done it where I have only booked the first night stay when I get to a place, or I haven't booked a place at all. And this really depends on the country that you're traveling to and what type of season it is, whether it's high tourist season or low season. If it's gonna be a really popular time of year, then you definitely wanna plan and book your accommodations out a couple of months. I would recommend 3 to 6 months in advance. But if tourist season is on the low end, then you could kind of fly by the seat of your pants and decide to book in hostels or Airbnbs at the last minute. You're not necessarily going to get the cheapest rates, but it does open you up to a lot more flexibility and spontaneity. And that leads me into point number 4, which is to plan how you're gonna get around. Now, this is something you don't necessarily have to plan far out in advance, but you do want to get an estimate on the cost it's going to take, unless you are planning to rent a car. Then of course you want to look up what the rental car prices and costs are and consider all the additional fees. Also consider renting a car from a car rental company that is local to the continent or the country that you are in, because you can often save some money that way as well. If you're not renting a car, then you just want to consider how much is it going to cost for me to get around every single day. Look at the average costs for shuttles or metros or trains and whatnot. Next, we're going to move on to major entertainment. If you're traveling somewhere, you probably have an idea of the big things that you want to see. So consider what is going to be high cost and plan that out in advance. Then consider how much you're willing to spend every single day on entertainment and just put that into a spreadsheet as well. With everything that I've already mentioned previously, you're going to want to add up the total costs for that category and put it down on a spreadsheet or a piece of paper. One of my favorite things to do, honestly, and the way I save a lot of money, is just doing my own self-guided walking tours, or I buy one of those tourism books from Lonely Planet or Rick Steves, and I walk around the city and read about it by myself. And then I get to do everything on my own time, and I don't have to worry about being somewhere at X time. So if you're on a budget, consider doing that. The next category is dining. Depending on where you're staying and which country you're in, the dining could be really, really cheap and you might eat out every day, or you might not want to do that. The perks, of course, of staying in an Airbnb or a hostel are that you might have access to a kitchen and then you can make your own food. Now, that's not always fun because you should definitely be trying the cultural cuisine and the foods that are highly recommended in that country, but you don't necessarily have to eat that every single day of your trip, or maybe you only eat out for dinner but not for lunch and breakfast. But again, you're going to want to look into what the average costs of dining out are and make sure you multiply that by the number of times you plan to dine out and then the number of days that you are actually going to be staying in that location. Once you get the costs written down for dining, let's move on to souvenirs and shopping. If you saw my What I Don't Buy video, then you know that I don't spend money on souvenirs. All right, we made it to the end for your entire travel budget planning. So you have estimated costs of how much you want to spend on each of these categories, and you're going to add it all up. And that is the approximate amount of money that you want to have saved for your trip. Now, you can do this piecewise. If you're planning about a year in advance, you can plan to purchase your airline ticket in the next 3 to 6 months and start saving for it now so that in 3 to 6 months you actually have the money to pay for it. Or if you're travel hacking, you have the time to acquire those points. Next, if it's important to book your accommodation ahead of time, then once you're done purchasing your airline ticket, or while you're considering purchasing your airline ticket, you can also be saving for accommodation in the next 3 to 6 or 9 months. So then when you actually book your accommodation, you're still about 3 months out from your trip. In the last home stretch, the last 3 months before you take your trip, you can start saving for the everyday spending like shopping and souvenirs, dining, and transportation and entertainment. Now, if you are a user of the anti-budget, this is where things get fun. Once you get your accommodation and your flights paid for, then everything else is the lump sum of money that you get to take and you can split up for your own daily use, which would be your daily anti-budget number. And then you get a bonus on top of that because you've already probably calculated your anti-budget for the rest of the year, so you already have your standard anti-budget number that you get to add on top of your daily travel anti-budget number. Now, if you're completely confused, then make sure to click up here to watch my video on how I use what I call the anti-budget. It's a budget that I use and recommend to people who hate or suck at budgeting. And especially when you're traveling with cash, it's a great way to be able to track your spending every single day without getting out of control or having to use your credit card and then go into debt. Finally is tracking your spending. If you're using your anti-budget, you probably have some sort of journal that you can track your spending in, but if you don't, then I recommend 2 spending tracker apps. The first one is Trail Wallet, and Trail Wallet was developed for travelers. You can set up your trip and put in the destination and it will calculate what your currency is versus the currency that you're going to be spending in, and it'll give you a dollar amount to spend per day based on your travel budget. So then you know how much you can spend every single day, and it'll do the currency conversion for you, and you just regularly log all of your expenses every day so you can keep track of what you're spending your money on and how much you have left. The second one is Personal Capital. Now, I use Personal Capital to keep tabs on my net worth and what's happening with my accounts from a pretty high 10,000 foot view. But when you're traveling, you do want to keep a close eye on your bank accounts and your credit cards in case of any malicious behavior that goes on when you are using your debit cards or your credit cards. Now, this can happen anywhere in the world, even in your hometown, so you're going to want to do this when you're home as well. But often you get texts or calls from your credit card company, which if you're in a foreign country and you don't have a data plan or a cell phone plan or your phone isn't even turned on, then you're not gonna know if something happens. So you're gonna wanna be able to log onto a computer or your phone when you're connected to Wi-Fi to see if anything is happening on your credit cards or your bank accounts. It's one of my favorite tools. I always recommend it, and you should use it too, if you want to. And that's all I have for my travel budget tips. I hope this gives you a good idea on how to sit down and plan out your travel budget for your trip, but also gives you some good tips on how to plan your trip, period, and find some money saving hacks in there as well. If you guys liked this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. I have some awesome trainings and resources which I will link in the description box below. And make sure you join the Wander Wealthy Facebook community. We're a private community of women supporting each other on our endeavors, building our life based off of being smart and knowledgeable around personal finance, personal growth, and travel. I hope to see you there. Go to www.wanderwealthy.com/FB to snag your invite. And don't forget to hit subscribe. I upload on a weekly basis, and I want you to be in the know when the next time is that you can wander wealthy.